35% of New Zealand households rent, so that's pretty significant. What is increasing is our ageing population is going to turn that on its head.
Rental property management expert Megan Lamont is known for her passion and expertise in the property rental market.
Having established herself as the property manager with compassion and community in mind.
By 2048, it's estimated that there will be over 600,000 New Zealanders over 65 renting. Are we equipped for that?
Is New Zealand becoming one of the most expensive places to rent in the world?
That's tricky, Mina. The cost of living in New Zealand is very high because we're a little country with not many people. Compared to 20 years ago, it was completely different. People were renting on their way to home ownership, whereas now it's completely flipped.
You're a property owner. How can you add value to the property?
Renting is still cheaper. You pay the price, you know what your cost is.
Is it better to rent or to buy a house right now?
Well, right now, I think if you're... Property in New Zealand is very expensive, but that's another whole conversation. You know, if you talk to most young Aucklanders, a lot of them will say...
Quick one, Mina here. Thank you for watching this episode. I appreciate you. Thank you for all your support. One thing that you can do for me is to please hit the subscribe button below. A lot of people who come and watch this podcast or listen to the podcast are not subscribers. And so we're trying to increase our subscriber base. We're wanting to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of this year. Are you able to help us? I promise you that if you hit subscribe, I'm going to work hard to make sure that my episodes are really good, that will get better and better. So, do we have a deal? The national median rent in April 2024 remained at $650 New Zealand a week, unchanged from March. Is New Zealand becoming one of the most expensive places to rent in the world?
That's tricky, Mina. They say the cost of living in New Zealand is very high because we're a little country with not many people. We could double the amount of people and the cost of living would decrease. I'm not sure how people would feel about that, but that's probably what we need to do.
But if you can't, undeniably, rent in New Zealand is high. I mean, a lot of what's happening in New Zealand is expensive.
Yeah.
Housing is expensive, food is expensive, rent is, even though it has gone unchanged this year, but like I remember when I was back 10 years ago when I lived in Queenstown, we paid $600 for a 2-bedroom unit, but by the lake.
Yeah. Hey, it's Queenstown.
It's Queenstown, so...
Yeah.
But that's because there was no properties to rent at that time. And we had to go with that luxury option because there's not, it was either having the rental or quitting job and moving to another country, moving to another city. Yeah. So, but Auckland is becoming a bit like that. Give us some light into what's going on in the rental market at present.
Well, Auckland it's a major city, and I think if you looked internationally, all major cities have issues with housing and pricing generally. So that is the reality of a big city. The demands are there, and that just is general market forces operating. The key thing is making sure that what people are renting is meeting needs in the sense of it's a good place to rent. So we're not renting out garages or caravans and things like that, which there have been really big changes which are making sure that happens, which I think is really important. So, and also there is a lot more chatter and beginning to happen now, the build to rent situation, which is they're great initiatives which I think will really help the people, the population, the ageing population, and the population that will never buy their own home. And that's exciting, and the government have made changes to allow for more of that. It will certainly change renting. It is going to change the price of rents. If you see what happens, it happened at Sylvia Park. It's a big build to rent that has opened there, and it's definitely impacted the prices in the area for mum and dad investors. So it's this whole flow on. You know, if you want mum and dad investors in, there has to be a reason to be in that. Otherwise, you know, why would you buy a property? So it's this whole... You know, it's like a braided river. There's lots of different streams that feed into it, and it's definitely a challenge.
Do you think that people who are renting are getting a good deal at the moment in terms of where they're living and how much they're paying? From what you see from your own experience.
Well, I don't think it's probably not as cut and dried as that, because owners, you look at owners, then they are paying high interest rates. A lot of owners I know are having to put in significant sums to hold the property in the hope that they're going to get some kind of capital gain. Are they going to get it in the next 5 years, 10 years or 20 years? And they still have all the costs of maintenance. So it's not quite, one side of the same coin, really. It's a bit more like the Tupperware piece that you find the different parts to go into it, you know. There is 35% of New Zealand households rent. So that's pretty significant. So that's across the board. Yeah.
Is it above average, or where does it sit in terms of other countries? Or where does it sit in terms of what's normal and what's okay?
Wow.
Is there such thing as normal?
That's a big, yeah. I think
the other question I should say, where were we compared to maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago?
Yeah, it's definitely increased. So I don't have the exact figures on
No, that's okay.
But it's definitely increased. And I think the significant thing is that what is increasing is our ageing population is going to turn that on its head, because by 2048, so it's still a good few years away, it's estimated that there will be over 600,000 New Zealanders over 65 renting. So that's a massive number, and that is, are we equipped for that in New Zealand? And I would say we're not equipped for that. And an ageing population also changes what properties need. They need single level homes. They need accessibility. They need, extra things around the property to be able to get around with a walker or help in the bathroom. And we're just not set up for that. We're not set up well for disabilities. We've rented to disabled. It is very tough for them to find property that works for them. Exceptionally difficult. So there are percentages of our population that find it very difficult. And then if they find a place, they want to stay. But there are, a lot of people we see leaving properties because they've been sold, because the owners can't make the numbers work anymore and they just can't hold on. So that's, it's this whole, is it too expensive? Property in New Zealand is very expensive. It's very expensive to build, but that's another whole conversation.
I'll have you here for part 2.
Yeah, that's I think affordable housing in terms of building is something New Zealand definitely is not, from my limited understanding. Well, I think 10 years ago we had a lot of people on their way through renting to their own home. So that would have been, most people were on that path to purchase, whether it would be in the city or elsewhere. But yeah, that's definitely changed. And, if you talk to most young Aucklanders, a lot of them would say, there's no way I'm going to buy a house, or certainly not here. Why would I want to spend that much money on a house? And they'll look for different ways to do that. So whether they, that's the whole mum and dad investor, I guess, is changing the face of that, or people moving out of the cities going into regions if they can get work or if they can work remotely. So I think, it's definitely changing. Quite how that rolls out, I guess in 10 years we'll see.
Where do you expect it to be in about 10 years?
Well, I think hopefully we'll have more build to rent so that people that go into those properties, they have 10-year long leases, a lot more, and European like that, where they have a lifetime for rent so that they have that security, can enroll their child at school and know that, oh, great, we're going to stay if we choose to. I think that creates a whole lot of security for families and individuals, which we don't have now. So I think that can change your society. So I think that's great, and I think hopefully we have more affordable housing so that we have more choices with how to build, which will then mean that people can afford to have their own home. Kiwis love that. I don't know what it is. It's something in our DNA. We left other lands to come here, and there's something about having your own little piece of 400 square metres or 500 square metres. It's something that is for people that come to New Zealand, anyone that comes to New Zealand. It's just that. It's mine. I know lots of people that have chosen to put money into business, and that's where they've invested their time and energy, and they don't want to own a house. They want to ring up and have the maintenance taken care of by someone else. That's a great feeling of freedom too, because then they're not tied to a property. They can up and move.
Is it better to rent or to buy a house right now in this year, 2024?
Well, right now, I think if you're buying, you'd get a good deal, maybe, because the market's tough. Renting is still cheaper than buying because you don't, you pay the price, you know what your cost is, you can budget on that. There's not the roof leak that comes up or bathroom leak that happens or driveway that needs seeing or letterbox that needs replacing. Or
is it better long term if you have to rent versus buying the house?
Depends which economist you talk to.
What do you think?
Well, it depends when you're brought. So many factors. It depends what you want out of life, I think. I think investing for your future is really important. So I see my kids, they've got KiwiSaver, they've got Sharesies, they're busy educating themselves on all of that area, far more than I did at their age, and we encourage them to do that, So for some people, having a mixed portfolio is going to be much better than having property. Because people are banking on the fact that property is going to go up. And depending on who you talk to, they would say, maybe it's not. But it always has. And so this is the dilemma. The crystal ball, is property going to do what it's done in the last 10 years? I don't know. Is it? I mean, those that own property want it to, but do I want that to happen for my kids? No.
Property owner, how can you add value to the property? So imagine that you've speaking to someone who owns the property right now who wants to rent it. How can they add value to that property?
Yeah, some great ways is seeing if you can add a bedroom, make a bedroom, so that if you've got a 2-beddie, we had a classic property that we managed. It was a good sized 2-bedroom, but with a separate laundry, and we said take the laundry out, add it, put it in. They had a big bathroom, make it in the bathroom and make the laundry a single bedroom. And that instantly added value to their property. So that's a real key thing. And sometimes you can do that on the same footprint, so you don't have to worry about anything extra. Adding a sleep out or something like that, which is now, the regulations have changed around that and made that much more accessible, so much so that you can almost add a minor dwelling.
Can you please get into that for us in terms of what has changed and make sense of it for us?
Well, you can build without resource consent. I believe. Again, check your own regulations on that. But meaning that people can then add value on their property without that significant cost factor that was going to have to be there. But you still need to build things to code and to get that all sorted. So, yeah, you can't just put a shack up and hang out a shingle and say it's for rent. So there are still things you need to do. But it's just looking at the property and going, well, how can I add that? Or what's the best way to do it? We had someone come that wanted to build a minor. You can build a minor, 65 square metres is in Auckland, without a garage. And they were going to do a 3-bedroom minor. And from my recommendation as a property manager, I wouldn't recommend you build a 3-bedroom because even though it's technically 3 bedrooms, they are very small bedrooms. And then you don't really want 5 people in a property that's small. The wear and tear on it would be more usually, whereas that's ideally suited to a smaller family. And so then you have one decent-sized bedroom and one other bedroom smaller for a child or for an office, and you actually can get, it works better value, I think, in my experience, those sorts of things. So it's looking at that. What can you change without a significant cost? Can you repaint it? Can you change the flooring? Is there small tweaks that will make it that much more? When someone walks into a home, they just go, oh, I could live here. So, making small changes, they don't have to be a lot of money, but just even changing out the curtains. If they're all sun damaged, just go to the warehouse and buy some nice new curtains. Makes a big difference.
How can a landlord ensure that if they don't have a property manager, how can they ensure that their property is looked after?
So part of that is the tenant selection and then regular checking in. So unfortunately, we met an owner recently who hadn't been at a property for 2 years, had thought everything was going really well and was devastated when she turned up. Devastating amount of damage.
What are we talking about here?
Just everywhere. It's damaged. Just, it's so sad. Just the wheels had come off, I'd say, the tenant's life. And although the rent had been paid every week, clearly other aspects of their life were not going well. And, yeah, it's a huge... So that's why there's inspections. We recommend regular inspections, and not that we think our tenants are damaging it, but it just helps create also relationship, make sure that small maintenance issues don't become big maintenance issues. A little leak under the sink, some tenants don't want to bother a landlord over it, but that can mean a whole replacement of the fitting down the track. Everything, the MDF will all blow up, and then that's a big job, whereas just getting it repaired is going to solve all that issue. So I think building that relationship is just key. But tenant selection is obviously.
How can you pick a good tenant if you have a house ready to go right now and you're kind of struggling with knowing? Because you can do all those checks and things, can't you?
Yes.
How does it work? And
you can do lots of checks. I think it's really important to go through the process of checking and making sure everything's aligned with what you've been told by the tenant applying. The last step we're bound by privacy law, so you can only ask so many questions. There's certain things we're not allowed to ask, which is totally appropriate. But it's getting a feel for that person. It's important to meet them, not do something with someone that you want to have met them. And there's different ways we can do that. We get people inquiring from overseas or from out of town. So we'll FaceTime them and meet them. We'll do our best to get a full picture of that person. So, yeah, I think that's the important thing.
But then what are the warning signs that someone is not quite the right tenant for your property that you're trying to rent out?
Well, if you've got some things that are just, you have a question. We had someone apply recently, and I'm pretty sure it was the aunt that was giving the reference. So they just didn't feel right. And some of the answers to the questions we ask, they didn't quite have the answers for, which, some landlords may not be able to do that, but generally they know, whereas this just felt made up. And then we did some more digging, and in our background checks found that there was a whole number of tribunal applications against the person, and you got to make sure you got the right tribunal application, but we were pretty sure it was the same person. So once we'd sort of got, something feels a bit not quite right, and it wasn't. So, yeah.
What do they look for in a good property manager?
Asking a few questions. So some of the questions to ask, well, first of all, make sure, meet them and see if you like them, if you gel with them, because you're working closely with someone. You want to make sure that you feel comfortable with them. If you don't, then don't. Find someone else, because I just think generally in business it's good to work with people you like working with, so first rule.
Yep.
Second is, making sure that they, are they a company? Well, probably you should do that before you meet them, but, are they a registered company? Do they have a registered bank account? It's not run out of their own private bank account. And what experience? So have they got their level 4 property management? That's available. It's the only real learning, kind of formal learning that you can do. So although it's not, I wouldn't say that's a must-have. All of my team have done it, and I've done it, and it's not rocket science. So, but it's just showing that people are invested in learning. And I think that's probably key, is that someone is up with what's happening in the industry. So you want to know that. What properties are they renting? What experience have they got in that? I don't think it would matter if they're new to the industry, but if they've come with some prior experience, or they've got people around them with experience. So I think when people are younger, they have a real drive, and so I think that's a great attribute to have. So it's not necessarily an age thing.